The Great Hall stretched for miles in every direction. 12 different alien races sat at the massive round table that took up the center of the room. The air was thick with tension as each species waited for the meeting to begin. Some breathed oxygen like humans did. Others needed special masks or tanks to survive in this shared environment. Admiral Jake Morrison stood alone in the middle of the circle. His gray uniform was clean and pressed. His face showed no fear, even though he was surrounded by beings who could crush his entire species with a single command. The human representative had been called here for one reason only: to receive judgment. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire spoke first. His snake-like body coiled and uncoiled as words hissed from his mouth. The humans have broken every agreement we made with them. They expand into space that belongs to us. They take planets that are not theirs. They build weapons when they promised peace. The crystalline representative, Council Prime Ixora, began to glow brighter. Her voice came out as musical tones that the translation devices turned into words. We gave humanity a chance to join our peaceful galaxy. Instead, they act like the warlike species we feared they would become. Jake listened without speaking. He had heard these accusations before. The truth was more complex, but he knew these aliens would not listen to explanations. They had already made up their minds about humanity. The arachnid delegate clicked his many legs against the floor. They spread like a disease across our space. One human colony becomes 10. 10 becomes 100. They breed too fast and want too much. They are dangerous, added the floating gas being from the Nebula Collective. Their minds work in ways we cannot predict. They solve problems by breaking things. They fight when they should talk. Jake finally spoke. His voice was calm and steady. You called us dangerous because we defend ourselves. You say we expand too much, but the galaxy is huge. There is room for everyone. You claim we break agreements, but every treaty you offered us gave you everything and gave us nothing. The room fell silent for a moment. Then Veltar laughed, a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe. Listen to him make excuses. This is exactly why humans cannot be trusted. They always blame others for their own crimes. Council Prime Ixora's glow became so bright that Jake had to squint. We did not call you here to debate, human. We called you here to deliver our final decision. Humanity will leave all contested star systems within 30 standard rotations. You will return to your home system and stay there. And if we refuse? Jake asked. The question seemed to surprise some of the aliens. The insect-like hive queen made a buzzing sound that might have been laughter. Refuse? You think you have a choice in this matter? Every species has the right to exist freely in space, Jake said. The galaxy belongs to no one race. The mechanical voice of the robot collective cut through the air like a blade. Wrong. The galaxy belongs to those strong enough to control it. Humanity is not strong enough. Council Prime Ixora raised one of her crystal arms. The decision is final. Humanity will be contained within your original solar system. Energy barriers will be placed around your space. No human ship will leave. No human will travel beyond those boundaries. You are making a prison for us, Jake said. We are protecting the galaxy from you, replied Veltar. Your species is too young and too violent to be allowed freedom. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when you have learned to be peaceful, we might reconsider. Jake looked around the circle of alien faces. Some showed satisfaction. Others seemed almost sad about the decision. But none of them spoke up for humanity. None of them suggested a different solution. What about the humans already living in other systems? Jake asked. What about our colonies, our research stations, our trade partners? They have 30 rotations to return home, said the ethereal being from the spirit realm. After that, any human found outside their designated area will be eliminated. The word eliminated hung in the air like poison. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach, but his face remained unchanged. You are talking about genocide. We are talking about necessary action, corrected the amphibious representative from the water worlds. Your species refuses to learn this is the only way to ensure peace. Jake nodded slowly. He had expected this outcome, but hearing it spoken aloud still felt like a punch to the gut. I need to transmit this decision to my government. Of course, said Council Prime Ixora. But understand this, Admiral Morrison. The time for negotiation is over. The time for mercy is over. Humanity will accept containment, or humanity will face extinction. Jake touched the communication device on his wrist. The signal would go out immediately through quantum channels to every human world and ship. Captain Lisa Rodriguez was waiting on his personal vessel just outside the station. She would make sure Earth received the message within hours. My government will need time to consider this ultimatum, Jake said. 30 rotations, Beltar repeated. Not one rotation more. The meeting was over. Guards from various species moved to escort Jake from the chamber. As he walked toward the exit, he heard the aliens beginning to discuss how they would enforce their decision. They talked about patrol fleets and monitoring stations. They planned the cage they would build around humanity. Jake paused at the doorway and turned back to face the assembled aliens one last time. You know nothing about humans, he said quietly. Nothing at all. Then he was gone, leaving behind 12 species who were certain they had just solved their human problem forever. They had no idea they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. 25 days had passed since Admiral Jake Morrison received the ultimatum from the Galactic Council. The aliens expected humanity to begin withdrawing from contested space. Instead, something else was happening, something that made no sense to the alien intelligence networks monitoring human activities. On the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, Dr. Kevin Chen packed the last of his equipment into storage containers. He had spent 5 years studying alien plant life on this station. His work was important. It could lead to new medicines and food sources for humanity. But 3 days ago, he received orders to return to Earth immediately. Why are they calling everyone back? Asked his assistant, Maria Santos. She was one of only 12 humans on the station, working alongside 50 alien scientists from various species. Orders are orders, Kevin replied, but his voice was tight with worry. He had received the same message as every other human in alien space. Return home immediately and bring all research data. The alien scientists watched with confusion as the humans prepared to leave. Dr. Zixai, a blue-skinned researcher from the academic collective, approached Kevin with multiple eyes blinking rapidly. Your departure makes no scientific sense, Zixai said in his translator-modified voice. Our joint project is near completion. Why abandon years of work now? Kevin sealed the last container. Sometimes work has to wait for more important things. What? Could be more important than the advancement of knowledge? Kevin looked at the alien scientist for a long moment. Survival. Meanwhile, on the mining world of Kepler 442b, Foreman Danny Walsh supervised operations that puzzled the local alien observers. Instead of shutting down the mining equipment as expected, his teams worked around the clock installing new devices. The machinery looked like nothing the aliens had seen before. Massive collectors with crystalline components that seemed to bend light around them. Energy readings from the devices were off any known scale. Governor Thexel of the local mineral rights consortium demanded an explanation. What is the purpose of these installations? He asked Danny through a communication screen. Mining equipment, Danny replied with a straight face. Our sensors indicate these devices do not extract minerals. They collect energy patterns we cannot identify. Danny wiped sweat from his forehead. The work was exhausting, but it had to be finished before the deadline. Maybe your sensors need calibration. The alien governor's skin changed color, a sign of anger in his species. Do not mock me, human. We demand to know what you are building. You'll find out soon enough, Danny said, then cut the communication link. Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. Human colonies that should have been packing up were instead building. Human research stations that should have been abandoned were being retrofitted with unknown technology. In the Sol system, the activity was even more intense. General Patricia Hayes stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching status reports flow in from across human space. The largest military buildup in history was taking place, but it was not what the aliens expected. Status report, Patricia ordered. Colonel Rick Stone read from his tablet. All civilian populations have been evacuated from contested systems. Military personnel are finishing the installation of defense networks. The shipyards are producing vessels at maximum capacity. What about the special projects? Dr. Ryan Cooper has sealed off Research Lab 7. No one gets in or out without his personal authorization. He says the work is too dangerous for outside observation. Patricia nodded. She did not fully understand what Cooper was building, but she knew it was critical to humanity's survival. The physicist had been working on theoretical problems that most people thought were impossible to solve. Apparently, he had found answers. "Ma'am," said Lieutenant Amy Foster from the communications station, "we're receiving protests from the Galactic Council. They say our withdrawal is not proceeding according to their timeline." "Send the standard response," Patricia replied. "Tell them we are complying with their demands, but the process takes time." It was not entirely a lie. Humans were leaving alien space, but not in the way the aliens expected. On board the cargo ship Heavy Lifter, Captain Steve Adams supervised the loading of the last evacuation transport from New Geneva Station. The human colonists were leaving, but they were not going home empty-handed. Every piece of technology, every research note, every scrap of useful material was coming with them. "That's the last of them," reported Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez. "All humans are clear of the station." "Good. Begin Phase 2. Bobby looked uncomfortable. "Sir, are you sure about this? Once we activate the devices, there's no going back." Steve looked out at the stars that humanity would soon be cut off from. "The aliens want to lock us away like dangerous animals. Maybe it's time we showed them how dangerous we really can be." He pressed a series of buttons on his command console. Throughout the abandoned station, devices that had been secretly installed over the past weeks began to activate. Energy readings spiked to impossible levels. Similar activations were happening across human space. Every abandoned colony, every evacuated research station, every mining facility was suddenly blazing with power signatures that the alien monitoring networks could not understand. On Earth, President Helen Martinez met with her top advisors in a secure bunker deep beneath the Capitol. The room was filled with tension as reports came in from around the globe. "The aliens are getting suspicious," reported Secretary of Defense Charles Wright. "Their probe ships are moving closer to our territory. They want to know what we're doing." "Let them wonder," Helen replied. "How much longer do we need?" 72 hours, answered Dr. Sarah Kim, the head of the secret project. "After that, we'll be ready for whatever they throw at us." "And if they attack before then?" Sarah's smile was cold. "Then they'll learn why you never corner a desperate animal." Back on Kepler 442b, the last human transport lifted off from the day mining world. Danny Walsh watched from the pilot's seat as the planet fell away beneath them. The energy collectors they had installed were already beginning their work, drawing power from sources the aliens did not know existed. "Think they'll figure it out?" asked his co-pilot, Jenny Clark. "Eventually," Danny replied. "But by then, it will be too late." The transport joined a convoy of ships heading toward the Sol system. Behind them, automatic systems continued the work they had started. The aliens thought humanity was retreating. They had no idea that humans were actually preparing for something much bigger. In the depths of space between star systems, construction crews worked on projects that defied imagination. Structures larger than cities, built from materials that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The workers were volunteers who knew they might never see home again. Supervisor Carol Turner checked the progress reports. Everything was ahead of schedule. "How much longer?" she asked her chief engineer. 6 more days to completion," Mark Johnson replied. "After that, we just wait for the signal." Carol nodded. The signal would come from Earth when everything was ready. When it did, the galaxy would discover that humanity had not been idle during their ultimatum. They had been preparing for war, but not the kind of war anyone expected. The 30-day deadline was almost up, and the aliens still did not understand what humans were really doing. They thought they were watching a species prepare for imprisonment. They were actually watching the birth of something that would change the galaxy forever. The 30-day deadline arrived with all the force of a thunderclap across the galaxy. The Galactic Council had expected to see human ships fleeing toward Earth in defeat. Instead, they witnessed something that would haunt their nightmares for generations to come. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster stood on the bridge of the starship Vanguard, watching the final alien vessel depart from the outer edge of the Sol system. The ship was a Zephyrian patrol cruiser, tasked with monitoring human compliance with the containment order. "They're clear of the perimeter," reported Ensign Tony Phillips from his sensor station. "All alien vessels have withdrawn beyond the 100-light-year boundary." Amy nodded and opened a channel to Earth Command. "This is Vanguard. The perimeter is clear. All stations report ready." The response came from General Patricia Hayes herself. "Understood, Vanguard. Begin the sealing." "Procedure." Amy turned to her crew. "You heard the General. Activate the barrier generators." The bridge crew worked with precise efficiency. They had drilled this procedure dozens of times, but none of them truly understood what would happen next. The technology was so far beyond normal human capabilities that even the engineers who built it could only guess at its full effects. "Barrier generators online," reported Chief Engineer Lisa Park. "Power levels are holding steady at maximum." "Energy collectors are responding," added Weapons Officer Dan Cruz. "We're drawing power from all installed stations." Amy watched her screens as something impossible began to happen. Space itself started to change around the Sol system. Reality bent and twisted as massive energy fields came online. The barriers were not just walls. They were fundamental alterations to the structure of space and time. On Earth, Dr. Ryan Cooper monitored the process from his sealed laboratory. He had spent months developing the theoretical framework for what humanity was attempting. The mathematics alone had nearly driven him insane, but the results were undeniable. "Temporal differential is establishing," he reported to President Helen Martinez through a secure channel. "Time dilation fields are stabilizing at the predicted ratios." "Speak in terms I can understand, Doctor," Helen replied. Ryan wiped sweat from his forehead. "We're accelerating time inside the barriers. For every day that passes outside, approximately 50 days will pass inside our protected space. We'll have decades to prepare while our enemies experience only months." The president was quiet for a long moment. "And the other effects?" "Hyperspace travel becomes impossible within our territory. Faster-than-light communication is completely blocked. We'll be invisible to their sensors and unreachable by their weapons." "At what cost?" Ryan looked at the readings on his screens. "We can never go back. Once the barriers are fully established, we'll be cut off from the galaxy completely. This is a one-way journey into the unknown." In the Alpha Centauri system, Captain Steve Adams supervised the final phase of humanity's withdrawal. The last transport had cleared New Geneva Station an hour ago. Now it was time for the most dangerous part of the plan. "All personnel report ready," announced his second-in-command, Major Lisa Turner. "The station is empty except for automated systems." Steve activated his command console. "Beginning station transformation." The abandoned research station began to change before their eyes. Sections that had been living quarters and laboratories reconfigured themselves into something entirely different. The station was becoming a node in humanity's barrier network, a focal point for energies that would reshape local space. "Transformation complete," reported the ship's AI. "Station is now functioning as Barrier Node 7. Energy output is within acceptable parameters." Steve watched as similar transformations occurred across human space. Every abandoned facility was becoming part of the network. Humanity was not just building walls, they were rewriting the laws of physics in their favor. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, the energy collectors that Danny Walsh's team had installed reached full activation. The devices tapped into zero-point energy fields that existed between dimensions. The power output was enough to supply an entire star system. But the aliens, monitoring the system, could not understand what they were seeing. Their instruments detected massive energy spikes, but the readings made no sense according to known physics. Governor Thexel of the Mineral Rights Consortium sent urgent reports to the Galactic Council. "The human installations are producing impossible amounts of energy. Our best scientists cannot explain the source or purpose." The response from the council was dismissive. Humans are a primitive species. Their technology cannot threaten our containment systems. The governor was not convinced, but he followed orders. He would regret that decision for the rest of his life. Deep in space, construction crews put the finishing touches on structures that defied description. Supervisor Carol Turner watched as the final components were installed on what humans codenamed Project Gateway. "That's it," she told her team through the communication system. "We're done here. Everyone return to your ships immediately." The workers evacuated quickly, leaving behind machines that would operate without further human intervention. The structures looked like metal flowers blooming in the vacuum of space, but their true purpose was far more complex. When activated, they would serve as amplifiers for the barrier network. They would take the energy generated by the mining installations and focus it into reality-altering fields that could reshape entire star systems. On Earth, the final preparations were complete. Every human in contested space had either returned home or volunteered to remain behind as part of the barrier network. The volunteers knew they were sacrificing their lives for humanity's future, but none of them hesitated. President Helen Martinez stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by her top advisors and military leaders. The moment had arrived for humanity's greatest gamble. "All stations report ready," announced General Patricia Hayes. "We're receiving confirmation from every node in the network. All alien vessels have withdrawn beyond our perimeter. We have a clear field for activation." Helen took a deep breath. "Do it." The command went out across human space simultaneously. On dozens of worlds, in countless installations, and aboard hundreds of ships, humans pressed buttons that would change everything. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Space around human territory began to glow with an otherworldly light. The barriers came online like the birth of new stars, creating walls of pure energy that stretched across light years. The aliens monitoring from outside the perimeter watched in horror as human space became enclosed in what looked like a giant soap bubble made of twisted starlight. Their sensors went dead. Their communication attempts failed. Hyperspace jumps toward human territory simply failed to initiate. Admiral Jake Morrison, now aboard the command ship Enterprise at the edge of human space, sent humanity's final message to the galaxy. It was broadcast on all frequencies for exactly 60 seconds before the communication blackout took effect. "People of the galaxy," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "You demanded that we be contained. You threatened us with extinction if we did not submit to your will. We have chosen a third option. We will contain ourselves, but we will use that containment to become something you cannot imagine." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "You have given us time. Time to think. Time to grow. Time to evolve beyond your understanding. When we emerge from this cocoon, we will no longer be the humans you knew. We will be something far greater." The transmission ended, and the barriers completed their formation. Human space became a closed system, invisible and unreachable from the outside. The aliens were left staring at a patch of empty space where human colonies used to be. Inside the barriers, the real work was just beginning. Time moved faster, energy flowed freely, and humanity had all the resources they needed to transform themselves into something the galaxy had never seen before. The aliens had wanted to cage humanity. Instead, they had given humans the perfect environment to evolve. It would be the last mistake many of their civilizations would ever make. 6 months had passed since the humans sealed themselves away. The Galactic Council had expected to find a defeated species begging for mercy when they checked on the containment. Instead, they discovered something that made their worst fears seem like pleasant dreams. Ambassador Veltar coiled nervously in his seat as he reviewed the latest sensor reports. The data made no sense according to everything the Zephyrian Empire knew about physics and technology. "The energy readings are impossible," he hissed to his aide, Captain Nextel. "The barriers around human space are not just containing them, they're amplifying something." The aide's scales shifted color with worry. "Our scientists believe the humans have created some kind of temporal acceleration field, time moves differently inside their territory. How differently? For every day that passes for us, approximately 50 days pass inside the human barriers. They have experienced months while we have experienced only days. Veltar felt his blood run cold. That means they have had decades to prepare for whatever comes next. Council Prime Ixora floated in her crystal chamber, trying to understand the reports from her science teams. The data was so far beyond current galactic knowledge that her best minds could only guess at what the humans were doing. The temporal distortion is just the beginning, reported her chief scientist, Dr. Crystal. We're detecting construction signatures that suggest massive industrial expansion. Whatever they're building in there is larger than anything we've ever seen. How large? Ixora asked, her crystalline form dimming with concern. The energy signature suggests structures the size of small moons, possibly larger. Our long-range sensors can occasionally penetrate the barriers for brief moments, and what we see doesn't match any known technology. Dr. Crystal activated a holographic display that showed fuzzy images captured during barrier fluctuations. The pictures were unclear, but they showed geometric shapes that hurt to look at, structures that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. What are we looking at? Ixora whispered. We don't know, the scientist admitted. Our computers cannot process the mathematics required to understand these designs. It's as if the humans have developed science that operates on principles we haven't discovered yet. On the edge of human space, monitoring stations struggled to gather any useful information. Captain Roy Turner commanded the automated station Cerberus, which had been positioned to watch for any human activity. The job was driving him slowly insane. Day 183, he recorded in his log. No change in barrier status. No communications from inside human territory. Energy readings continue to climb beyond our measurement capabilities. He paused, staring at readings that made his head hurt. Something is moving inside the barriers. Large objects, ship-sized, maybe bigger, but they don't move like any ships. We know. The movement patterns suggest they can ignore gravity and acceleration limits. Turner had been a military observer for 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for this assignment. Every day brought new readings that shouldn't be possible. Energy spikes that could power entire star systems. Gravitational anomalies that suggested the humans were building artificial black holes. Construction signatures that implied they were assembling objects larger than planets. The worst part was the silence. No communication came from human space. No signals, no messages, no desperate pleas for help. Just the steady hum of incomprehensible technology growing stronger every day. In the arachnid hegemony, scientists worked frantically to understand what the humans might be planning. The spider-like beings were masters of prediction and pattern analysis, but human activities defied every model they created. Chief Analyst Webkith clicked his legs in frustration as he studied the data. The construction patterns make no strategic sense, he reported to the Hegemony Council. They're not building weapons platforms or defensive installations. They're building something else entirely. What kind of something? Asked the Prime. Clutch Mother. We think they're building ships, but not ships as we understand them. The energy requirements suggest vessels that could travel between stars without using hyperspace. The construction materials seem to include elements that don't exist on the periodic table. The spider beings exchanged worried glances with their multiple eyes. Are they preparing to attack us? Webkith's analysis programs ran constantly, trying to find patterns in the chaos. We don't think so. Attack preparation would look different. This looks more like evolution. The most disturbing reports came from the robot collective. Their mechanical minds could process data that organic beings found impossible to understand, but even they struggled with what they observed. The humans appear to be rewriting basic physical laws within their territory, reported Central Processing Unit Delta 7 to the Collective Council. Gravity, time, space, energy, all of these concepts function differently inside their barriers. Is this possible? Asked the Prime Logic Core. According to our previous understanding, no. According to current observations, yes. The humans have somehow gained access to scientific principles that we classified as purely theoretical. Delta 7, displayed complex mathematical formulas that described the impossible things happening in human space. They have learned to manipulate the fundamental forces that hold reality together. This should not be possible for a species that was using chemical rockets only centuries ago. The implications were staggering. If humans could alter physical laws, they could create weapons that ignored all known defenses. They could build ships that traveled faster than light without hyperspace. They could reshape entire star systems to suit their needs. Probe attempts failed consistently. Every time an alien vessel approached the human barriers, it simply disappeared, not destroyed, gone, as if it had never existed. The barriers didn't just keep things out, they erased anything that tried to cross them. Dr. HFY of the academic collective volunteered to lead a research mission to study the barriers up close. His ship, the Knowledge Seeker, was equipped with the most advanced sensors in the galaxy. Beginning approach to human barrier, he transmitted to his base. Distance, 1 million kilometers and closing. The response came back immediately. Be careful, Doctor. We've lost contact with every probe that got closer than 500,000 kilometers. HFY's multiple eyes studied his readings as the ship moved closer to the glowing wall of energy. I'm detecting. This is strange. The barriers don't seem to exist in normal space. They occupy multiple dimensions simultaneously. What does that mean? It means the humans haven't just built walls. They've created a pocket universe with its own rules. His voice grew more excited as understanding dawned. They haven't contained themselves. They've transcended into a higher state of existence. That was his last transmission. The Knowledge Seeker crossed the 500,000 kilometer mark and vanished without a trace. By the end of the first year, panic was spreading through the galactic community. The species that had demanded human containment were beginning to realize they had made a terrible mistake. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council became daily events as representatives struggled to understand what they were facing. Some called for immediate military action. Others suggested trying to negotiate. A few wise voices recommended fleeing to the far edges of the galaxy. We created this situation, admitted Council Prime Exora during one heated session. We forced them to isolate themselves, and now they're using that isolation to become something we cannot comprehend. Ambassador Veltar's scales had permanently shifted to the color of fear. Our military advisors estimate it would take the combined fleets of all 12 species to break through their barriers. Even then, we have no idea what we would find on the other side. What if they come out on their own? Asked the representative. From the water worlds. What if they decide to expand again? The question hung in the air like a poison cloud. No one had an answer, because no one could imagine what humanity had become during their months of isolation. The barriers continued to pulse with ever-increasing energy. Construction continued behind the impenetrable walls, and somewhere in the growing darkness of space, shapes moved that no longer resembled the ships humanity had once built. The galaxy had wanted to contain the human threat. Instead, they had created something far worse. They had given humanity the time and motivation to evolve beyond all recognition. The cocoon was almost ready to open, and what emerged would not be the same species that went in. Time was running out for the aliens who had made this choice. Soon, very soon, they would discover what humans could become when pushed beyond all limits. 5 years had passed for the galaxy, but nearly 300 years had gone by inside human space. The barriers that had once glowed with steady energy now pulsed with patterns that hurt alien minds to observe. Something was stirring behind the walls humanity had built, and the galactic community waited with growing terror for what would emerge. The first sign came as a simple message broadcast on all frequencies across the galaxy. The transmission cut through every communication system simultaneously, bypassing all security measures and appearing on every screen, every speaker, every information device in known space. We're coming home. The voice belonged to Admiral Jake Morrison, but it was different now. The words carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond normal hearing. Alien scientists who analyzed the transmission found mathematical patterns embedded in the sound waves, patterns that described technologies beyond their understanding. Council Prime Ixora convened an emergency session of the Galactic Council within hours of receiving the message. Representatives from all 12 species gathered with fear written across their alien features. "The barriers are fluctuating," reported Dr. Krixtal, his voice shaking with barely controlled panic. "Energy readings are spiking beyond our ability to measure. Something massive is moving toward the boundary." Ambassador Veltar coiled tightly in his chair. "Do we have any idea what we're facing? Our best estimates suggest they've built a fleet that numbers in the thousands, but the individual ships—" Dr. Krixtal paused, struggling to find words. "The largest vessels appear to be the size of small moons. Their energy signatures don't match any known power source." The first ship emerged from the barriers like a mountain rising from the ocean. Fleet Admiral Lucy Thompson stood on what might have been called a bridge, though it bore no resemblance to any command center the galaxy had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living light that responded to her thoughts. The controls existed in multiple dimensions, allowing her to manipulate reality itself with simple gestures. The ship she commanded defied every law of physics the aliens thought they understood. Its hull was composed of materials that existed in quantum superposition, simultaneously solid and energy, matter and void. The vessel's size was impossible to measure because it seemed to occupy different amounts of space, depending on the angle of observation. Behind the flagship came the rest of the human fleet. Thousands of vessels emerged from the barriers in perfect formation, each one a masterpiece of impossible engineering. Some ships looked like crystalline flowers that bloomed in space. Others resembled geometric shapes that hurt to perceive directly. A few appeared to be made entirely of contained starlight, but the most shocking thing about the fleet was not the ships themselves. It was their crews. The humans who had sealed themselves away 3 centuries ago were no longer entirely human. They moved with perfect coordination that suggested some form of shared consciousness. Their bodies showed subtle modifications, enhanced reflexes, expanded sensory organs, neural interfaces that connected them directly to their vessels. Admiral Jake Morrison, now bearing the title of Supreme Coordinator, led a delegation to meet with the Galactic Council. His ship materialized in the space station's docking bay without using any visible propulsion system. When he stepped out, the aliens gasped in horror and awe. Morrison looked like a human, but enhanced beyond recognition. His eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. When he moved, reality bent slightly around him, as if space itself acknowledged his presence. Most disturbing of all, he was not alone. Standing beside him were representatives from 12 other species, but these were not the same species the aliens knew. They bore the same enhancements as Morrison, the same impossible integration of biology and technology. Some were recognizably Zephyrian, others clearly arachnid in origin, but all had been transformed into something greater. "You wanted to contain us," Morrison said as he entered the council chamber, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated through dimensions. "Instead, you gave us exactly what we needed." The alien representatives shrank back from the human delegation. Up close, they could see the true extent of the transformation. These beings radiated power that made the air itself seem heavier. Their presence suggested capabilities that existed beyond the normal universe. "What have you done?" whispered Council Prime Ixora, her crystalline form flickering with terror. "We have become what we always had the potential to be," replied one of the transformed aliens, a being who might once have been Zephyrian but now existed as something far more complex. "Your containment gave us the time and isolation we needed to evolve beyond the limitations that held us back." Morrison gestured, and holographic displays appeared in the air around him. The images showed the transformation of human space over the past 3 centuries. Cities that existed in multiple dimensions. Factories that converted pure energy into matter. Research facilities that studied the fundamental code underlying reality itself. "We spent our first century learning to manipulate the forces you thought were immutable," Morrison explained. "We spent the second century teaching willing members of other species to join us in transcendence. We spent the third century preparing for this moment." The implications struck the alien council like physical blows. The humans had not just advanced technologically, they had recruited members of other species and transformed them into something beyond natural evolution. "You're talking about forced conversion," accused the representative from the robot collective. One of the transformed beings, possibly once a member of the academic collective, laughed with sounds that carried impossible mathematical harmonies. "Nothing was forced. We offered transcendence to any being willing to embrace evolution. Many accepted. Many chose to remain as they were. All were given the choice." "What choice are you offering us now?" asked Ambassador Veltar, though his scales had already shifted to the colors of absolute terror. Morrison's enhanced eyes seemed to look through the alien representative and into his very soul. "The same choice you gave us 5 years ago. Submit to containment, or face the consequences." But even as he spoke, the barriers that had once enclosed human space began to expand outward. Not quickly, not violently, but with the inevitable certainty of a rising tide. Star systems on the edge of human territory found themselves suddenly enclosed in the same reality-altering fields that had transformed humanity. "You're expanding. Your containment to include us," realized Council Prime Ixora. "We're offering you the opportunity to evolve," corrected Morrison. "Within our expanded territory, the old limitations no longer apply. Scarcity, death, the boundaries between species, all of these things can be overcome. You can become part of something greater than any individual civilization." The transformed delegation spread throughout the council chamber, approaching each alien representative. As they moved closer, their true nature became apparent. They existed partially outside normal space-time, their consciousness spanning multiple dimensions simultaneously. "And if we refuse?" asked the prime clutch mother of the arachnid hegemony. Morrison's smile held depths that contained the birth and death of stars. "Then you will remain as you are, trapped in your limited understanding of what life can be. But you will remain within our territory, protected from the chaos that your old ways of thinking inevitably create." The expansion continued as they spoke. Alien worlds found themselves suddenly subject to new physical laws. Gravity became optional. Time could be manipulated. The barriers between life and death, between organic and digital consciousness, between individual minds and collective awareness, all became permeable. Most shocking of all, the transformation was not destructive. Alien civilizations found their capabilities expanded rather than constrained. Disease became impossible. Resource conflicts ended when matter itself could be freely manipulated. The fear of death faded when consciousness could be backed up and restored. But the choice of transcendence remained exactly that, a choice. Those who wished to remain in their original forms were protected and cared for. Those who chose evolution found themselves welcomed into a collective consciousness that spanned dimensions. "This is conquest," protested Ambassador Veltar, but his voice lacked conviction. Around him, other council members were already showing signs of curiosity about the transformation being offered. "This is evolution," Morrison replied. "You forced us to choose between submission and extinction. We chose to transcend the limitations that made those the only options. Now we offer the same transcendence to you." The barriers continued their expansion, encompassing star system after star system. The process was not violent, it was transformative. Reality itself was being upgraded to support forms of existence that the old universe had made impossible. Within days, half the galaxy existed within humanity's expanded territory. The aliens found themselves living in a universe where their greatest dreams were suddenly achievable. Faster-than-light travel without hyperspace limitations, communication across any distance instantaneously, the ability to visit other dimensions and explore realities beyond imagination. Some species embraced the change immediately. Others took time to adjust. But all found themselves part of something larger than they had ever conceived possible. The Galactic Council's final C.